The following is a special video presentation of the Hennepin County Library.
Welcome to a discussion with author Lou Shaw. I'm Steve Benson. Lou Shaw is the author of Honor Thy Son, just published by Abingdon Press. He's also a radio and TV movie producer and a theater producer as well. Lou, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Honor Thy Son works as a mystery thriller. It also happens to be about a child with Down syndrome.
Yeah, the idea I had was I wanted to do a mystery thriller. I'm very at home in that from my television experiences. And I wanted to introduce a grown young man, in his 20, 21 years old. And I carefully chose a father who rejected the son at birth and wanted to give him up for adoption. The wife refused and the marriage broke up over it. And after some 20, 21 years, he's finally thrust back with the son that he had
pulled unwillingly back into a very interesting and complicated web.
Yes, what basically happened is the son was framed on a murder because they figured they had the perfect patsy, because how can he defend himself? The father really didn't want any part of it because he really didn't want to face the son. And it's been ruining his life as well, that whole denial. And so it gave me an opportunity to put these two together and lock them in. And very shortly, they're both on the run.
And it shows that wonderful reconciliation. Again, we don't want to give away all of the plot of this, but it's a very heartwarming story. And at the same time, you're pulled along page by page because it's a very gripping thriller.
Well, thank you. I hope so. Yeah.
You began your work in television, of course, many years ago, and a number of years ago on a show called The Fall Guy, you introduced people who were mentally and physically challenged. Tell us a little bit about that and the barriers that you had to overcome.
Well, at that time, I wanted to do a story of, it was on Fall Guy, of a young man of 10 who had Down syndrome, who gets locked in with my lead, kind of like this. And so I broke the rules and I hired a young man of 10 with Down syndrome to play the part. And everyone got very discouraged about it because it was 47 pages of solid dialogue for the boy and for the Lee Majors at that time. And there was a lot of friction because they didn't want it. They didn't want to spend what they thought would be tremendous overages because how would he be able to do it? How could he do it? And so it was quite a battle to get it through.
You put your own career probably on the line.
I don't think it helped. I don't think it helped, except when the show finally came out, and I won the first battle. When the show finally came out, it was the highest rated Fall Guy in its history. And so then, what is the old saying? There are many fathers of a victory. Then I never knew so many people were behind me.
Right. Well, tell us some of the anecdotes, and there's one that you told me before we went on the air now today that I think I'd like to have you share with our listeners.
Kind of the most charming and frightening one that happened was on the first day of shooting, virtually everybody from Fox Studios and ABC showed up to see it because they really felt it would fail, and they were worried about it and also wondering what happens because each day cost $55,000 to $75,000. And the opening scene was a very short one where it was Jason Kingsley. All he had to do was, as the director said, walk around the truck, crawl under the truck, and look out. Very simple shot. And he said, "Have you got it?" And Jason said, "Yep." So he said, "All right, roll him, do it." And Jason stood there, didn't move. And there was a hum going through, and I actually, as I mentioned to you, I had...
Stomach fell.
Yeah, and I had this literally a cartoon bloop over my head saying "career over." And so the director said cut, and he went back to Jason. "Do you understand the shot? All I want you to do is go under and then look up at the camera." And Jason said, "I know." So he said, "Okay, roll him, do it." Jason doesn't move. And now it is over. And everyone, we told you and all of that. He came back to Jason. He said, "Jason, do you understand?" He said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, why don't you do it?" And he said, "You never said action." So he was well trained.
Uh-huh.
And after that, it went just smooth as silk. It was really a wonderful shoot. And the Lee was very taken with them, and everyone was. And we got high ratings and tremendous reviews, and the show started winning awards. And so everyone was very pleased at that time. And it basically opened the door to Life Goes On, because Chris Burke, saw that show. He was in a sheltered workshop, and he said, "That's what I want to be as an actor. I'm going to be a great actor." And we became friends after that, and he became friends with Jason. So it was kind of a nice after story that went on the whole long series.
And of course, now we see people with Down syndrome and other problems on TV commercials, ads. Still, though, the movies, there doesn't seem to have been that kind of breakthrough for major motion pictures that there has been on the small screen.
That's true. The only one I could think of, well, there was one a few years back. I forgot who was in it. And then, of course, The Rain Man, but it was Dustin Hoffman playing an autistic person. There have been a couple, but not really. And what it's trying to show now, I think, more and more is that it's a huge, huge percentage of our population has one kind of disability or another. And it's trying to bring them into the mainstream, and now they're using them in a few more commercials, which is kind of exciting. Not stating, oh, this boy has Down syndrome, aren't we
just
wonderful?
part of the McDonald crowd.
That's right, exactly. So that's all kind of encouraging.
You're in the Twin Cities this summer now. It's the summer of 1994, part of the National Down Syndrome Congress. Tell us about some of the issues that people are looking at this conference.
Well, the National Down Syndrome Congress is nationwide, and there are about 470 active chapters throughout the country. And the rate of births, for instance, it's still about 1 out of every 800 live births is a baby with Down syndrome. And the main thing that's going on now is inclusion, full inclusion for every child in the public school system, so that they have the opportunities of being in normal classrooms, in a normal situation, without anything special going on. And it's quite amazing how it works when the teachers and everyone cooperates, but it's a heavyweight struggle.
You have a child who has Down syndrome yourself, a daughter.
15-year-old daughter, correct. And I went through some of the things here, but I think every parent that has a child with a disability of a sort has to get over a lot of humps and grow up. And so it's turned out to be the love of my life. It's wonderful.
Presumably, too, part of those humps that you have to get over are the opinions of other people, perhaps relatives or friends, who perhaps their natural reaction is, I don't know what to say. Somebody's had a Down syndrome child. What do I say? Do I congratulate the parents? Do I say nothing? It seems to me that part of educating the public is getting, in quotes, those other people to have a sense of acceptance.
True. The average, if there is such a thing, but most of the people with Down syndrome can do what most other people can do. It just takes them a little longer. And the main thing they're fighting still is prejudice, because they might look a little different, they might take a little longer, they might seem to be guileless, or they might seem to be very slow. And it's a matter of just taking the time of acceptance as part of our society. And they do turn out to be good working people. They can go to school, they can graduate. I know of some that have graduated college. I know some who are driving cars. So that with the right training and all, which is getting more and more comprehensive, it seems that the acceptance is growing, but it's still a tough struggle.
Your character, JJ, and in a few minutes I want to have you read a section about JJ and his father. But JJ works and he wants to get married to his girlfriend, Holly. So very much a full-rounded, independent life, or wants that life.
Yes, and he's accomplishing it. It's not an unusual one, where he's got a job and he likes his job and he's good at his job, and he wants to be married, or he wants a romance, and they're in an independent living situation, which they've been training for, and it's a training that takes place. And she is already, his girlfriend, who also has Down syndrome, has already gone through various stages, so she's capable of being alone in an apartment. And there is supervision that comes and goes, but it can be done. And his dream in the book is to learn how to drive a car so that he can drive off his bride, just as his father drove off his mother. And he carries around the picture with them driving off under a hail of rice, and that's his dream throughout the book.
Well, it's a wonderful murder thriller on its own account, and you do slide in a lot of interesting information, and it's not in a preachy level or not in an offset academic level. I found that particularly fascinating, learning about the 21st chromosome sort of incidentally as part of the action.
Yeah, well, it's an important part of the action because the father is learning about it, actually. And as he learns about that, he's forced into having a relationship with this boy he's rejected. And as he learns more about that, he's also inadvertently uncovering what this whole crime was about. And he really in his heart at the start believes his son did it. And it was what you call a perfect locked room mystery, so that he was in a way a witness. So that he's not only emotionally wants to believe his son is guilty, but physical evidence points to that. So,
why don't you read a section of it, Lou?
All right. I was thinking this is a short little section of where they've been running from the police and from the criminals for a long time, and the father's faced with the situation of no longer being able to run from himself because he's face to face with his son day after day after day. And they erected a tent, and it's in a raging storm just to get away because they had no place to go. And the father's been drinking pretty heavily, trying to fight all that's coming up in
denial,
him.
that denial again.
Tremendous denial. Let's see, where should we start? Well, let's just start right in the middle of it, the scene. Jack looked across at JJ for the first time. The youth smiled back with an innocence purer than any Jack had ever seen. Jack started on his second bottle of scotch. A song kept echoing through his brain. How could a love that seemed so right go wrong? He felt claustrophobic, not within the tent, but within the confines of himself. His brain seemed to ricochet against his skull, looking for a way out. He was struggling to stay together. The inner claustrophobia had whipped him into a frenzied panic. And the song, How Could a Love That Seemed So Right Go Wrong? Jack suddenly heard himself howl, when you were born, I never loved anyone so much in my life. I was the first one who held you. You looked me straight in the eye and stopped crying. I was the happiest man in the world. There you were, 10 fingers and 10 toes. Jack broke down, sobbing convulsively. Empathically, JJ said, but I had Down syndrome? Yes. Is that why you left? Jack rose with a shriek. After 20 years, a dam burst. He fell back in tears, too choked to talk, pain oozing out of him like poison from an infection. JJ was bewildered. Instinctively, he rose and sat next to his father. The tent on his side collapsed, but neither noticed. JJ put his arm around Jack. Jack slumped against JJ's chest, sobbing, saying over and over, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. JJ didn't understand his father's words, only felt his father's anguish. Wisely, he said nothing, just held his father tightly. 20 years of repression exploded as Jack relived his shattered expectations, the shock at having a child so different from the one he dreamed of, the impotence he felt when he couldn't do anything about it, his fear of the unknown, his sense of inadequacy, the denial of fault, the nonstop depression of knowing this would be the end of his family line, his anger at God for doing this to him, the torment and guilt of having a son like this, the profound depth of his disappointment. Jack lamented the waste of all these years. He grieved for his betrayed hope. He mourned the death of the child of his expectations. A terrifying image arose before him, the coffin of the son he had expected being lowered into a grave. In the ancient tradition of farewell, he saw himself throwing dirt on the coffin of his expectations. He collapsed, moaned. Tears streamed past his tightly closed eyes. When he opened them, he saw his father gazing down at him, gently kissing his forehead. His father dissolved into JJ, smiling warmly. Jack's head rested on his lap. Another floodgate opened. As Jack drifted back to sleep, he felt somehow purified. JJ held his father in his arms.
That's a wonderful scene where the son comforts the father.
And they still have plenty. This is about, I guess, about 2/3 of the way through the book, and they still have plenty of way to go. And but they start a whole kind of different relationship, and he finds that he can, for the first time, accept JJ on his own terms because he's put to death. He's grieved for the son that he'll never have.
In previous generations, people were often advised when they had a child with Down syndrome to put the child into an institution, never really bond with that child.
Exactly, and that's what happened to this man. And that's virtually never done. I know very few children that are even taken away from their, that their parents give them up. You'll find almost all of them are now living at home with their parents and doing really well. And then as the relationship develops, he finds out that his son has a pretty good sense of humor, and he can accept him as a unique person. This is his son, uniquely.
Isn't that part of what coming to terms with a child who has Down syndrome or a child who has any other disability is that realization that these are unique human beings with their own needs, wants. They are not perfect children?
Yes, and I think what you'll find here too is what you just said is true of almost every father and son or father and child, where the child is not living up to the expectations of what that father expected from that child.
Jack's own father, he never really lived up to that father's expectations.
Or I've on my tour, I found a father who was irate because his son wouldn't join him in the hardware business. And the kid doesn't know what he's doing. He's 18, he's out drinking beer, and he's doing this. Absolute lack of acceptance of that person as he wants to be or who he is. So this almost goes beyond children with handicaps. It's a universal situation.
Well, also in being able to accept the things that a child with Down syndrome does that are wrong. I mean, that you have to at times correct them, and at times they're going to say, "I hate you."
Yes, they will. They become very independent, like anyone else, and there's a whole full range of emotions, and they run the same gamut as anyone else. And for instance, when some years back, and not too many years back, I'd say within the last 20 years, when they'd said, what is the mental range of a person with Down syndrome, they'd say from moderately retarded to grossly retarded. Well, since early intervention and inclusion and mainstreaming and working and parents getting involved with their children and no more institutions for these children, they've now gone that on an average they are only mildly retarded to moderately. Rarely have I heard of anyone being grossly retarded, because what they did was test kids in institutions.
Yeah, who don't have the stimulus.
They had nothing. They were actually put in a corner and given nothing. They couldn't even talk.
Why don't you read a further section, Lou, that shows this reconciliation between the
Well, this is kind of a short little one that'll give you an indication where they're talking the next day. And what happened right before it is that Jack had to use him to get into a security building, and he never did figure out how the kid got in. And he said, "You never mentioned how you got that guard to let you in." Grinning, JJ emerged from behind the bush. "I told him I had Down syndrome." Jack stared at him in surprise. "It didn't bother you to say that?" "No, why should it? It's the truth, and it always works." "What do you mean?" "Well, I learned that when I was still in grade school, if I didn't do my homework, the teacher got real mad, and I said that it wasn't my fault because I had Down syndrome. She felt so sorry for me, I always got an A." "You're really a con man, aren't you?" He said, "I told you, that's what Mom says. I'm just like you." Jack laughed. A thought surprised him. He was glad JJ felt good about being like him. He stepped closer, gazing into JJ's eyes in fascination. "You have one brown eye and one hazel eye, just like me." JJ laughed. "That's right. Half my chromosomes come from you, and the other half come from Mom. But neither of you wants to take credit for that extra one." Jack was jolted. JJ was still laughing. "That's Mom's joke? You kid about that sort of thing?" "Sure, whenever one of us thinks of a good joke." "Well, I guess having an extra chromosome isn't that bad, is it? You want mine?" "Is that another of your mother's jokes?" "No, it's my own. I'm glad you liked it." So he starts accepting them, and see, the son never had a problem through it because the mother had kept the image of the father alive, and suddenly he's dealing with a person without any of his own baggage along. So they're both coming to a relationship pure after the grief he went through.
Well, I'm sorry we can't reveal any more of it, but I would urge people to go out and find this at their local bookstore.
Thank you.
Writing is more of a solitary occupation, whereas television and movies are much more of a collaborative. You also are working on a number of theater projects. Tell us a little bit about that change from a collaborative effort. You've written for a number of programs. We talked about some of them. You've written for Quincy and The Fall Guy.
Well, I've written and produced and created quite a few shows. Like Quincy, I actually created and produced those, and it's collaborative except when you write. When you go back to your office and sit in front of the computer, you're all by yourself again. Books are. This is my first novel, and I'm very pleased with it. You know, got a publisher, and the publisher's pleased, and incidentally, it's just reaching the bookstores, and I just found out they're going into their second printing, and that made me feel pretty good.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you. And I enjoyed writing the book a lot. It has its own discipline. From a screenplay, so much more highly structured, and it's like a garden, I guess you could say, where you know, you fix the soil and you go under the soil and you're sowing the soil, and most of the work is unseen in a screenplay. The writing of the dialogue is almost the easy part. That takes the least amount of time. It's the preparation. In a book, you have a greater freedom of developing of the characters. Suddenly your character will go off one way. You can go along with it and see how it works. You don't have that rigid thing that it's not a motion picture. And
although this book is also very visual. I mean, you can see the scenes. Did you visualize JJ? I mean, I have an image of JJ, and presumably you do too.
Yes. I do. In fact, one of the blurbs is from Chris Burke, where he said, "I saw JJ in my mind right away. I really liked it." And I'm happy to say there is already some film interest in the book, even though the book is just reaching the bookstores now. Early galleys went out to a few select people, and there seems to be some really good interest.
Well, perhaps Jason, the boy that you worked with some years ago.
Well, it's possible. It's possible.
I'd like to go back to that collaborative effort on your television shows. I think for many people, the idea that a show gets cranked out once a week is a pretty mysterious project. Tell us how, when you come up with an idea, then how do you work with the other members of the crew?
Well, it'll start with like if you're writing a pilot, you mean, or just every show?
Well, maybe once it gets established, where you get into the routine.
Well, then it becomes a real kind of. It's very hard, especially if you're the producer in charge of the show, because
Pressure,
you're simultaneously, the show, it takes usually 8 days to shoot a show, so you're losing 3-4 days because the show comes out every week. So you're simultaneously usually preparing like 5, 6, 7, 8 scripts. So you're working with those writers or writing them yourself or with your staff. You're at the same time shooting a script, so you're casting that with the director and the cast and making sure that runs, and you're watching that daily. Even as you're preparing the show that goes next, because they all take about 10 days preparation, so you're working with the director on that and you're casting that and getting that organized. Even as you're cutting usually 4 shows simultaneously, because it takes a long time in post-production. So basically you're working on maybe 8, 9 totally different episodes simultaneously, and making it all join and keeping all these various shots in mind, every single shot of the show. So it becomes pretty hectic. It's a round the clock. On any of these shows, if you're in charge of it, you're working usually 6 and probably 7 days a week, writing or producing or cutting, and you're getting a call from the editor, you got to run right down here and see this shot. You run down there and a scene didn't work right, and you start working there, and suddenly 2 hours go by, or 3 hours, and then suddenly the whole day's behind. Pretty soon it's 1 o'clock in the morning. So it's pretty hectic, but it's a lot of fun. It's
but sooner or later it's captured on video. Now you're also working in the theater, where you can't go back. I mean, once the action has taken place on the stage, that's it. And as we know, lots of things happen in the theater.
Right. Well, I find theater. I wrote this play. I produced and even directed some theater. So I've got a play that'll be coming out in November. The premiere will be down in Fort Lauderdale, the world premiere, and I'm very excited about that as well, obviously. And that's a whole different experience again, because the writer has more prestige, or I guess the word is he has more power than in any other form, because no one can do anything without your saying okay.
Isn't this also going to be a musical?
No, that's another thing I'm working on.
Another thing you're working on as well.
Yeah, it's a musical. Yeah, that's coming along real well too. But now it's
because that's certainly another element to be added.
Yeah, but at this point, my mind is very much just on the novel and the play. And at this point, I've just been on this countrywide tour on the books, so my mind is pretty zeroed in. I like to do one thing and do that and hopefully do it real well and then go on to the next.
Are we going to see another installment of J.J. and Holly's life?
Well, it's strange you asked me that, but I had an idea and it came out kind of full-blown as I was flying, and I have a tremendous number of notes. I have a book in mind as a sequel already that is very well worked out in my head and with a lot of notes, so I might, maybe depending on how well this goes or what my time might develop to be, it would have to be like 3-4 projects down.
You're also going to be speaking, again, this is the fall now of 1994, to the ARC convention. Tell us a little bit about ARC.
The ARC is a wonderful organization. It's the largest, I believe, organization that deals with disabilities, people with disabilities, and they're having their national convention in Las Vegas this year, and they asked me if I'd be one of the plenary speakers. So they want me to discuss the media and what's happening with the people with handicaps in the media. Is it developing really, or is it going backwards, and just kind of do a little history of it and bring it up to date and talk about what it's doing. And because they feel it's very important, and I do too, because look how much people pay for an ad, and, you know, on a Super Bowl, they'll pay $600,000 for 30 seconds or something, and here free you have, if you can get somebody with a disability on television, it's an enormous impact, and it does have influence.
It seems to me too that there's going to be a tremendous change. We've already seen splintering of traditional audiences now with cable, also phone link-ups are on the way. How are you as a writer-producer dealing with the technological revolution?
Personally, I'm not. That's kind of bewildering to me. I'm sure I'm going to get into it though, because I have all the equipment in my office ready to go, and I don't understand any of it. So I figured about maybe 2 months after I get back from this tour, and I'll have to call somebody and have them teach me. I can't. I'm
Presumably
not very good.
your daughter, 15 years old now, the kids are much more ahead of things than.
Well, my daughter
parents.
with Down syndrome can come up to my computer, and she flips it on and gets through the menu and finds her own name, Hillary, and brings up Hillary, which is hers, which has been saved, and she's an ongoing writing thing going on there, and she asked me not to read it till she was all finished, so I have no idea what she's writing or how good it is or what it's about, but she can work the computer perfectly.
What are you going to tell the ARC convention about your own hopes for Hillary?
I'm going to tell them that my hopes for Hillary, and I think they're more than hopes, I believe it will happen, that she's going to lead a relatively nice life and finish high school, possibly go on to college, and probably end up getting married and living alone and working and having her own apartment and leading her life, wherever it might lead. I mean, it's like, how do you predict where any child is going to go?
Lou Shaw, thank you very much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Lou Shaw is the author of Honor Thy Son, just published by Abingdon Press. I'm Steve Benson. A presentation of the Hennepin County Library.